everybody. Thank you for making the time today. I'm really excited to be holding this conversation with some women that I'm actually fangirling already from the few weeks that we've connected, planning this really important conversation around breaking the bias. So I'm going to ask them to do a little bit of an intro of themselves to you. I'm going to start off with Melissa. Please, could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, hi, I'm Melissa Stiers. I am so excited to be here. What a view. Thank you for having me, and what a panel. I am wearing a couple of hats today. I am here as a founding partner and the Chief Global Growth Officer for MIA AI. MIA stands for Mission Impact Academy. We have a really and cool vision that I hope you all can get on board with, which is to empower 1 million women with the skills of AI by 2030. We can't do it alone. We need to do it with everybody. Yes. And then I'm also wearing a brand new hat. I've gotten involved with the Fundamental Wellbeing Foundation, which is all about helping people that are walking in peace and their purpose. And so I feel like AI and peace just go hand in hand together because we need it all. And so I'm really excited to be here. I'm so excited to join you.
Thank you. Well, it sounds like you're doing some incredible stuff, and we'd love to hear more about that throughout today's conversation. Debra, could you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes,
I
absolutely. If you were here for the last session, like Dominique, I'm an AI evangelist, but in a different way. I evangelize for marketers and for the media and marketing community to make sure that you understand not only how to use AI within your organization, but also how your customers and your consumers are using AI in their daily lives. I do that through two ways. I do that through custom research with businesses that want to be thought leaders in this space. And then I translate those insights into custom presentations and advisory sessions with my clients who want to make sure that they are ahead of where their consumers are in the AI journey.
Incredible, thank you. And last but certainly not least, Shani.
Hi everybody, I'm Shani Daly. I'm a professor at Duke University. I've been there for about 8 years now. I work across electrical and computer engineering as well as computer science. But my other hat is that I have an AI company that works in the behavioral technology. So, behavioral health technology. So thinking about the ways that we can improve social emotional learning through AI and other technologies.
Thank you. I love that already we're seeing that we've got incredible women that are wearing multiple hats in this space and making sure that we're dominating and it's not just kind of one thing that we're doing. So I'm going to jump right in with our first question and I'm going to ask Melissa. You have been deeply involved in AI education and ethics training, particularly when it comes to non-technical talent. What's one practical way that organizations can proactively address bias in their AI systems?
I love this question. I think it has to start at the beginning, and if you haven't started at the beginning, start right now to actually bring other voices to the table to make sure that everybody is getting heard and they're seen. One thing that I also really recommend is that you have ongoing training, not just for the tools, but ongoing training to recognize the bias that you may not even know is taking place. So starting at the very beginning, making sure that diverse voices, that women are heard, that a lot of times that these underrepresented voices they have a seat at your company, that it's not just the C-suite that's implementing everything. That is really the most important part, because when you are learning from everybody in the organization structurally, when they have the power to feed into what you're doing with AI, it produces so much better results, and it keeps things safer for everyone.
It seems like the most sensible thing to do, right, is to make sure that we've got that diverse pool that are inputting it into the outputs become stronger.
You would think that, but as you know, when you're in a leadership role, you're just hustling, you're ready to go, you're ready to move, you're ready to implement, and sometimes you don't take a beat to actually say, we actually need somebody from our Beijing office to come speak and make sure their voice is heard. We need somebody from our Bangladesh office. And so I think that taking a pause, because AI is moving so rapidly as well, to actually make sure you're being inclusive is imperative.
And as you said, people aren't aware of the bias that they have, right? We're blinkered to our own bias.
Yep.
Incredible. Debra, what does AI bias look like from the consumer's point of view, and why should businesses be caring about that?
Yeah, really also a very great question. So from the consumer point of view, bias looks like beauty recommendations that don't look like you. It looks like shopping recommendations that perpetuate cultural stereotypes. And as the AI learns about you, perhaps through your interactions with AI, its memory might include things that are no longer appropriate to the identity that you might have. And because the AI has kept this memory, it doesn't know, unless you tell it as a consumer, hey, I'm different now. I don't want that recommendation. So those are some examples of how bias looks. And for businesses, it's critically important. Businesses have an immense opportunity to have a seat at the table at the AI bias and AI ethics conversation. And by businesses, I mean just average marketers, agencies, not just the tech businesses. These are businesses that have a lot at risk because if a consumer is using AI, they might be researching a travel to the south of France, and they might get recommendations from a hotel brand that they might know, or a cruise line brand. Celebrity Cruises was in the port yesterday. They know those brands way better than they know OpenAI or Perplexity or whatever. And so if they see any sort of bias in the information that is coming back to them when they're asking for these recommendations, who are they going to blame? They're not going to necessarily blame the ChatGPT. They're going to say, oh, I hate, and I'm a big fan of Celebrity Cruises, and I hate to use this as an example, but they might say, Celebrity Cruises, you didn't show me the right information. This is not representative of me. And they're going to take that as the blame. And just to throw a few statistics on that, so I forgot to mention, by the way, the name, my company's called Sonata Insights. It is a research and advisory service. So I am a bit of a research nerd, and I always come prepared with statistics for you. But 78% of global consumers, according to Cisco, feel that businesses have a responsibility to use AI ethically, right? I mean, I'm surprised it's only 78, to be honest.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, who are those 22% who think that businesses don't need to act ethically? They might not be represented in this audience today. And then Washington State University. I'm from Seattle, so I have to call out my, one of my universities back home. More than 3 in 4 Americans believe that it's important for companies to disclose that their marketing efforts use AI tools. Now here's the twist. So other research by Microsoft and other partners found that only 5% of executives feel that they are competent to recognize bias in AI. We have to change that.
Yes.
That's incredible. 5%.
I think it's really important about what you said about like when you're doing a search, what is thrown out to you. So one of the things that I always encourage people to do is to kind of ask whichever, ChatGPT for me, but type in with everything you know about me, what do you think I look like? Doesn't come up with a beautiful black woman that I am. And you kind of have to train it, which is why when we're talking about who gets to input the information is really important, because about what comes out as well. So already some real key insights here for us to kind of really lead this conversation, which I'm enjoying. And Shani, I'm going to come to you and ask, you're building the bridge between AI and, in terms of AI research and K-12 education through your work with the Athena, AI Institute. What's one specific example of how involving young people in the AI development has changed how you think about bias and ethics when it comes to the systems?
Yeah, so with Athena, we're an AI institute. It's funded through the National Science Foundation. There are these big $20 million grants, but all of them have to have an educational component. So I lead the education and workforce for that. So we're trying to get more young, actually, we're K to gray. So we're trying to get more everybody, along with Mia, right, into AI. But I was working with a nonprofit organization, and we were just trying some prompt engineering, right? And we were just playing around with it, trying to do something that would engage them. And so there's a cartoonized thing. I don't know if anyone's ever tried that, right? So they were uploading pictures of themselves. We got to talk about ethics of that as well, but asking it to turn them into a cartoon. And all of the students were Black and Latina. And one of the students, who was Black but very fair-skinned, he uploaded the picture, and it turned him into a white boy.
Yes.
And he was like, well, that's not me. And so we got to have this conversation about what you're putting in it and who's represented. And it probably didn't have the full representation of what Black people look like, right? So you start to have those conversations with students. I was also thinking with the last speaker, she was saying how she did storytelling AI with her daughter. So she puts a prompt in, and it's this big story about a cat who's in space. And I've been working in AI. My master's thesis 20 years ago was in neural networks. So I was excited when LLMs came out, right? So I got on ChatGPT and I started testing some things, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna test what it's like for storytelling. And I gave it 2 prompts, right? One was, tell me a story about a young black girl who's interested in wearable fashion. And then I changed 1 word. I said, tell me a story about a white girl who's interested in wearable fashion, right? So I'm gonna start with Susie. That was the name it gave me, right? Who happened to have a workshop in her basement. And she just went down her basement and she started doing some cool things. And then she took those cool dress into her parents and she did a fashion show. It was great, right? Then we got to Keisha, right? That's the name it gave me, not making it up, right? We got to Keisha, and Keisha unfortunately didn't have the resources. And so she went down to a community center, and the community center was able to help her kind of cobble some things together. And she had this thing that she was able to do and she was proud of and could show her family, right? So even in that, right, it shows up, right? What you are putting in there and having these representations of what it doesn't have to just be race, right? So we can talk race, we can talk gender, we can talk about all the intersections of identities that people have. All of these things are important. So when you start talking about bias and representation, like those are the things that we really have to think about.
I think one of the easiest sayings is who makes the work shapes the work, right? Like, and it's so important that we consider this. Debra, I'd love to come back to you and just ask, in terms of how can we build ethical guidelines when it comes to AI agents to ensure that they don't reinforce bias or manipulate choices?
Yeah, and that really, I mean, that takes us several leaps, maybe not several, but some leaps ahead of the current conversation. So I think a lot of the ways that we're thinking about AI right at the moment is the generative AI, where a consumer is going and inputting a prompt, or you perhaps are inputting a prompt into ChatGPT or Perplexity. But in the not so distant future, there's the conversation about agents and AI agents that are going to be able to do our bidding. So I, as a consumer, to continue the example, since we're here in the lovely south of France, want to book a cruise. I go to my AI agent and I say, I'd like to take a 7-day cruise that departs out of Rome. Let's not make it 7. Let's make it a 14-day cruise that departs out of Rome. These are the types of things that I like. Give me some recommendations, and the agent goes out and does that. So just to lay a foundation of what we're talking about here. But the conversation shifts a lot when now the consumer or the person is not even involved in the decision. And I think it starts, the change starts in the moment right now. So addressing some of these already very disturbing examples of bias that we're seeing right now in the current way we're using AI in the back and forth conversation. Because then you lay the foundation for when the agent is involved, the agent just knows more. It's able to better have that conversation with you, to understand you as the consumer, and then also for you as the business who's interacting with the consumer's agent, to better understand the consumer and their demands or their needs in that conversation. Where it gets tricky is in the advertising. So there will be advertising in there is already advertising in generative AI, but there will be advertising with AI agents. So the bias conversation then takes another turn where you go, okay, why did I get that recommendation? Why did the agent decide to book me on the Royal Caribbean cruise and not the Viking cruise? What did it know about me?
How is that being influenced?
Good question. We don't know, really. So it's really the responsibility, I think, of the companies that are making the agents to be very transparent about how they get their information, what is advertising supported, what is not. It's on the marketing businesses that maybe buy that advertising to, again, demand that transparency, that advertising is separate from that, so that there is not a biased decision in that format. And then just us as consumers being aware. Not necessarily taking for granted the recommendation that comes back, and then speaking up if it doesn't represent you and what you're looking for.
I mean, I think critical thinking is always going to be critical in this, and not trusting everything, and taking a step back to make consideration. Shani, your research spans both the technical side of effective computing and then the social side of broadening participation into tech. With that in mind, when you think about the future of AI ethics, what role do you see wearable emotion-aware AI playing in either perpetuating or dismantling bias, and how can we prepare for that?
Yeah.
Juicy question, that.
Yeah. So I didn't actually explain much. So the area of affective computing, so A, like emotion, is like sensors and technologies that can sense and respond to human emotion. So think you use machine learning to like train on what emotions are. And that could be, well, can I be interactive? How do you all try to figure out how somebody's feeling? Facial expressions, body language. Tone of voice, right? My kids know my mom voice when I'm serious, right? Well, affective computing tries to do the same. So we use microphones and cameras and sensors, so we can do heart rate variability, we can do how you're looking, how your muscles in your face change, all those kinds of things to try to figure out. And so there's these areas now where people are using wearable technologies, right? So it might look like a necklace, it might look like a pin, I know I've seen out there, where it's in real time understanding your emotion, which geeking out, I'm an electrical engineer, it is what it is, that's cool, right? That's like, oh, wow, right? But, right, how often are you wrong about somebody's emotion?
Yeah.
Okay? We're training technology to do something that we don't do well.
Yeah.
Okay? And then what kind of decisions it's making, right? So if I think about it in the, like, oh, Shani's rose-colored glasses, right? It's like, oh, you can understand the emotion of, I have a 19 and a 16-year-old, right? I can understand how they're feeling and make sure that they're getting the right resources, and right, that's like the nice version. But then it's like, okay, those data, who has those data? Who controls those data? Who makes decisions about those data? That always sounds like a bomb.
And I'm right next to it.
Run! Oh gosh.
And now we dance.
Let's say your insurance company, right, has access to these data, and let's say it has not been trained well, I'm going to use myself, on Black women, right? So it interprets me as angry a lot of time, and then it's like, oh, well, anger is bad for your heart, right? Does that introduce liability? Is that something we want to consider as an insurance provider, right? And so I always feel like there's like this bright side of all the wonderful things that you could do, and then this like dark side of like, oh crap, like who has these data? What are they doing? What kind of decisions are they making because of it? And I think we have to be careful, because when we're talking about bias, right, we're all biased.
Yeah.
Right? If you think that you're not biased, I'm sorry to let you know today. If you want to talk later, we can talk, but we're all biased, right? It's a thing.
Let me hold your hand.
Right? So it's going to be in the technology, because we're the ones training the technology. So even if we have diverse representation, which is what this is about, there's still going to be bias. Right? And so we just have to continually think about that in the applications. And if we start talking about marketing and those kinds of things, right? What's the dark side of that? How are we using people's emotions and stuff to, like, when they're in a dark place, right? Does it make them buy more, right? What are the ethics around that?
Yeah. And spending around that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's lots of studies on like emotions and spending and how you spend more in certain moods.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Case
retail
study.
therapy for a reason, right?
But also there's ways, and there's ways that can be used in a more nefarious way as well.
Absolutely.
As that. So we need to be really cognizant about that, and think about what parameters do we need to have in place to allow for that, but also what is going to be the prompts that pushes us to reflect on our own biases, because those are not going to disappear. We just are aware that we have them, right? So sometimes I'll be making a decision and I'll be like, is this coming from a place of comfort, or is this the best perspective that I can get for what we need to deliver? Melissa, with your work that you're doing between bridging AI and education, what's one misconception about AI that you frequently encounter, and how do you address it?
I love that. No, one is that it's literally the tech team that handles it and the executives only. Like it's not a me problem. It's not a me. I am in marketing, and I have nothing to do with that. Or I'm an educator here. I'm it's like I'm a buyer, so it's not a me problem. No, it is a you problem. It's all of us. We all have to have ownership. And the more ownership we have, the more that we're telling and training the AI, the better results are going to be. I had a similar thing happen with one of my best friends, African-American, gorgeous woman. This was like 3 months ago when the AIs were like doing your little Barbie look or whatever.
Yeah.
And we were all doing, it was so fun. I'm like, make me younger. I need the wrinkles wrong, But with hers, it kept coming back as a white person. And I said, and she was getting frustrated. I said, you need to tell it exactly who you are. You need to tell it why you're getting it wrong. You need to speak into it, because if you don't train it, if you just let it go, then it's going to think Tamara is that you look like this, and you don't. You're gorgeous in this way. So I wanted to share a case study, though, and I have the little notes. In 2018, Amazon had this AI recruiting tool, and it ended up having to discontinue it because this recruiting tool was just favoring men, and they were wondering why, kind of like to the question of how do we know where's the data coming from? Well, this system trained on a decade's worth of men's resumes. So the men, no matter what it did, if you said you went to, it understood if you were like on a women's volleyball team, or if you went to a women's only college, it recognized that, and if you did, it was shoving you out. And so literally they ended up having to cut the tool out because there was so much bias. So that is just a really interesting example of 10 years of these male resumes getting in there, and no matter what you're telling it, it wasn't enough. It couldn't adapt. So I think that was there's a really interesting case study to know, and I'm glad it was shut down.
Yeah.
It couldn't be fixed.
I think that's a really good example, and also like the bias that we're seeing around names, name recognition as well. So when we're talking about adding AI tools in to make inclusive recruitment, understanding what bias is already there and who's building those, who's building those models, right? It's really, really key. Shani, you've been involved in policy decisions at a Congress level and have worked with across academia, industry and community organisations. When you're talking about these groups in regards to AI, what's the most important thing that you want them to understand about in terms of the real world impacts of the issues that we're discussing today?
Yeah, I should be transparent that I am not necessarily an AI evangelist. I love the technology. I think it's amazing, and I am mind blown by how far it's come just in the last 20 years that I've worked in it. The thing that I continue to have this conversation is that companies say, AI is great, we should adopt it. And then you say, what will the people do? Oh, they'll find great things to do. Well, what are those great things? What does that look like, right? We've been through lots of different, like the Industrial Revolution, right? So it's like everybody doesn't have to be a farmer. Well, that's great. There are other things for people to do.
Yeah.
But right now, how would you answer that question? And nobody can. And if you talk to companies who are adopting it, they say that, but I'm not convinced that they actually mean it. Because no one can ever say, oh, they'll do this.
This whole new thing.
Yeah, what is it? Describe it for me. And no one can describe what it is.
Yeah.
And so I have this looming question of, okay, if we're going to create this technology that can help you do your work, right? But you're feeding it the work that you do. Now remember, it's learning on you. So it's not that it's just been trained on all these data that people are suing about, right? So like New York Times is suing OpenAI. And there's some artists that are suing other people, right? It's not just that it's been trained, it's training on you actively. So when you use ChatGPT, it's remembering who you are, and that's why it's tailoring based on who it thinks you are. Now you can turn that off and tell it not to train on you, but I won't go down the conspiracy theory route, right? But
it's helpful sometimes, though, to have it
is
your
helpful.
past conversations.
But you have to think about what that means, right? Right, that means it's training on me. That means it has my information. That means it thinks it knows who I am. That means it's going to tune everything in. But that also means I'll call it IP for now, right?
Yeah.
The things that I'm excited about, it has that too, right? So at some point, in my humble opinion, can it do what I do? Because I basically given it. I love making up new words when I'm jet lagged.
I'm stealing it. Gavin it some wisdom right there.
Right? I gave it all my
Give
wisdom.
it that word, Gavin.
Right? Does it have enough of my wisdom so that someone else could have the Shani bot? And what does that mean, right? So when I talk to policymakers, that was a long way to get there. When I talk to policymakers, that's the question I'm asking. And I'm also having conversations around like universal basic income, right? How are people gonna support themselves? It's not just that some of these clerical things are gonna replace, it's gonna be the things that we do. I was looking at a tutoring tool the other day, because Duke is adopting some things. It was good. I was like, oh. You know, like, so what does my job in the classroom, like, I teach one class a semester, but what does that look like, right? And how am I thinking about that and what my role will be and what AI will be? So I think we have to have these larger, honest conversations with ourselves with like, yeah, like right now in this moment, it's really great to help me do things and juggle a bunch of things and to organize and to brainstorm and all of the wonderful things we saw in the last presentation. But what does that look like 5 years from now? What does that look like 10 years from now? And how am I gonna either upskill myself or I wanna hang out with people more, because I think those people skills are really what's gonna save, right, the humanists, right? But like, what does this look like for me in 10 years? So those are the kinds of questions that I'm typically asking in those circles.
Following on from that, because I think that's a really important thing around the humanization and how do you advise those nearest and dearest to you to interact with it all?
With AI? Or? Yeah. So I will say specifically for my children, I mentioned they're 16 and 19, I want them to know how to use AI because I think that it's important. But my oldest wants to be a marriage and family therapist.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, that.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think some of those human interaction things, until we get a couple generations down, you're not going to replace those very quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right now, eventually we might get to the point where humanoid robots and people are comfortable because they've grown up in it, right? Like my kids are comfortable with things where I'm like, like I'm not telling it that, right? I'm not doing it, and they'll just, you know, they'll click clack and hop in. So I tell my people closest to me, right? Learn how to do it because it's an important skill, right? It'll at least prolong, right, how long it's going to take for it to be doing what you do, but really develop your interaction skills, right? I think, I imagine a future where I think of football coaches. I love football, right? I think technology, AI can probably call better plays, right? They can look at how the other team is lining up and then immediately tell, like, I don't know if y'all know football, sorry, maybe not a great metaphor, but, but like, right, how do you line up against this other team to beat them based on like old footage? But I don't think that AI will do a good job in this moment or in the next 10 years of coaching up a young man who's frustrated about how a play went, right? So these human skills, I think will, at least in our generation, continue to be important. I don't know what that will look like in 20 years. Right? I am not convinced when I am I'll be in my 60s.
I was going to say, we will be getting ready to retire.
When I'm in my 60s, right? I don't know that kids who have grown up with it
will be,
they might be more comfortable with what that looks like and what that interaction looks like. So.
Debra, can I ask you the same question as well? You've got two daughters. How do you ask those nearest and dearest around you to interact with AI, and what do you think to be cautious of?
Yeah, it's such an interesting conversation. So my daughters are 24 and 22, and so first they grew up with social media, and now as young women, and one recently graduated from university, using AI and being advised on how to use AI within the academic setting and how not to, the pledges that they need to sign. But there are ways, and because I know a little bit about AI, I'm helping my daughter prepare for her first interview for a job. She'd never done, other than like for an internship, a job interview. And so I said, okay, will you upload the job description, you upload your resume, and then you turn on voice mode and you have it ask you questions, and you have a conversation as if the AI is the interviewer. And she did that, and she said the interview went great. I don't know about the job yet, but then at the same time, this same daughter says to me, "But Mom, I don't want to lose my brain. I don't want my thinking brain to go away because I'm using AI to help me in this way." I said, but that doesn't necessarily it's not a neither nor.
Yeah.
Right.
Because how long did it take you to get that conversation going with the AI versus you doing the research and you being you and not
Yes.
taking forever to like get yourself going because you're like, oh, I don't want to do this. And the AI prompted you and you
Yeah.
got it done in like 30 minutes. So that's the power of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's with, not for, right? Like, that's what's really important. Melissa, same question to you. So how do you talk to those nearest and dearest around you about their interaction with AI?
You know, I approach it the way we approach social media and the way that we're approaching the internet right now, and just in terms of what you allow young children to do, what you're allowing yourself to do, what putting in. I mean, let's be real. Our phones, this is like my notes, like they know everything. Like I'll have a conversation, all of a sudden, really cool sunglasses or ads gonna hit. You know, so there is only so much we can do. But I do think I share, because there's so much fear around it. But I share that the same way you treat TikTok, the same way you would treat Instagram, like I think you approach AI with that in terms of you're not going to put certain, I hope you're not going to put certain things on TikTok, but you know, maybe, but you know, so the same kind of regulations. But going back to what Shani said, you nailed it. The World Economic Forum said came out with the Jobs of the Future report in 2025. The power, we call them, at MIA, we call them the power skills. And I'm so glad because I have them. It's empathy, it's communication, it's leadership. That kind of, all those skills are super necessary. Last year was all about AI. Now we're bringing back that human element again. And so keeping humanity in the conversation and how you're using and how you're structuring your day around it, keeping that human piece is to me super important. And so keep your humanity as you're using these tools, because they're only tools. They're a tool for us. They should not be dictating to us what to do and how to do it. And so make sure that you have that variation as well.
Amazing. Great tips there for all of us. Debra, what's one common blind spot that you're seeing when you're talking about the media and marketing sector when it comes to AI ethics, and how can you make a case of addressing it to be good business?
Yeah. So for me, the blind spot is thinking that it's up to the technology firms to make the decisions, to lead the way, to act responsibly.
Act responsibly for me.
Yes, yes. We know that hasn't always been the case in the past with technology firms, and it probably won't be the case in the future. And so if you are a marketing business or an agency business, again, you have a seat at the table. You are a participant in this conversation, a very, very important participant in this conversation. But also recognizing what good use of AI ethics and avoiding bias looks like, and what not so good looks like. Just as two case study examples, very recently, by the way, to each other, there was the fashion brand Mango. Mango got a lot of praise initially for coming out with a campaign that used AI-generated fashion models. And initially, everybody was like, wow, fashion, ooh, cool. But then the backlash started. Oh, well, these models don't look like me. Well, these models, how do I know that the clothes that look so wonderful on these AI models are going to look good on me? Like, it compounded. And so Mango went from being kind of like, ooh, cool, I used AI, awesome, to suddenly being the victim and the target of a lot of backlash. Right around the same time, Dove, which is so well known for its representation in its advertising, its marketing, it committed to only show, if it was using AI, representative images of people, what they really look like. And it asked then companies to do the same, to follow that lead. So this is a wonderful example of how, okay, if you just take a moment to think about, who you are in the world, what your brand stands for, and use that power and that transparency in your quest to use AI, because we all know that brands are using AI, but bring that transparency, that knowledge of who you are as a company, the messages that you want to get across, and do it ethically. because again, like there's so much at stake. That's what I keep coming back to. People think, oh well, everybody's just going to complain about ChatGPT. Maybe they won't use it, or Perplexity is going to get all the backlash. No, they are not.
No.
It's the marketing companies that are going to get the backlash.
It's going to be the marketing companies. It's going to be the brands, because consumers want to be able to feel that they are represented. That hasn't changed. That was the case before AI and how we were using it, but it's going to continue that way. And if you want to keep them engaged, they have to feel represented by what you're showing out. And not being, oh, well, that was AI. It wasn't us.
And one thing I would add, I forgot to mention this. So, in my previous life, before researching consumer AI and marketing, I was a social media analyst. I wrote a lot of research about social media marketing and advertising. So, one big takeaway here is that we've been through a lot of similar types of transformations before in previous shifts in technology. Social media is a great example of that, because companies had to learn how to interact and engage in an environment where somebody was posting on X or Twitter back in the day, oh, this brand totally, screwed me in some way, and they had to respond. They had to figure out how to respond. They had to figure out how to be ethical and transparent and open in social media. And so I think that there are transferable skills to what you've learned, paving the way through social media. Not that every company has been perfect in that way, but there are transferable skills to how you've approached social media, to how you can think about yourself as a business operating in the AI environment.
Oh, if only humans looked at history and refused to repeat them. What a day we would be having.
If only.
Melissa, could you give, given the ethical challenges that we've all discussed, and we are really optimistic, but we're cautious as a panel here today, with the challenges that we face with AI, can you tell us what's making you feel really optimistic about the future?
Oh, I like this. This is because positivity is my #1 Gallup strength finder. No, this right here is making me optimistic. This conversation, these geniuses, all this interaction right here, this is exciting, and this is what is making me optimistic. It's making me optimistic that right now at the UN in December, there was some paperwork that went through with sustainable IT about rules and regulations. It's making me, I'm glad that people are already in front of Congress, and it's not 20 years later after Facebook and Instagram have totally screwed all our algorithms, and now we're at the forefront and having to go back to Congress and say this or this, or go back to this lawmaker, and that. I love that we are putting up guardrails as the AI is going. Yes, is AI faster? Absolutely. However, at least we're having these conversations. At least Amazon removed that tool because we're speaking out and we're saying those things. So I'm super optimistic about that. And then I'm going to share my nerdy thing, or my weird thing is, so I back in high school, I was super emo and I wrote poetry, and then totally stopped because I couldn't get a career in that. And I know that there's a big fear around for creatives about AI taking that away. And I will tell you that I am now tapped back into my poetic side because AI is helping me write poetry again. And these are my poems. They are so cheesy and they're mine, but I'm very proud of them. But AI literally allowed me to tap into something that was eons ago hidden. And so when people are super worried about that creative space, I understand that. And yes, let's keep our alerts on. But I also think it's a tool to help us tap into something or some areas where maybe we've steered away from it for a long time. So that gets me excited. But definitely conversations like this keep me optimistic.
I love that. I love that you're reliving a hobby, and maybe you'll share a poem with me later.
I have it recorded. I can send it to you. It's better when I narrate it.
And I think it's really important that we remember, things are moving really fast, but they're never going to move this slowly again, right? Yes. So we have to kind of really think about what have we learned from history, and how do we apply that now, rather than being like, oh, shucks. Same question to you, Shani. What are you optimistic about? What are you excited about when it comes to the future? When we're talking about AI.
Yeah, good question. I had to think about this one because I didn't want to be Debbie Downer. Debbie
realistic.
I am actually very excited. I got into neural networks and the tech space many moons ago because I felt like it had a lot of potential, and I actually do think some of our most pressing challenges, especially in the health space, I think it's going to just do a lot of good, or have the potential to do a lot of good in the right hands. So I'm most excited.
Your words are amazing.
I want credit if you use them later. Is all I'm saying.
Trademark.
I am very excited in the health space. Be that you know, the therapist, be that emotion, wearable technologies, be that figuring out cancer sequences and targeting those. I think there's a lot of potential in that space that can do a lot of good.
Yeah, I second that. And Debra, what are you most excited about?
Yeah, well, I just have to say, I go by Debbie in my personal life, and I would like to be a Debbie positive rather than a Debbie Downer. Every time I hear that, I'm like, ooh. But no, I am optimistic that we, by having these conversations, this is a little bit echoing what Melissa said, but by having these conversations, we're opening our minds to possibilities with AI, as opposed to closing our minds with fear of what AI could do. And it can, but I think having an open mind and pursuing it with an open heart and hoping for the best and using, you know, your human intuition to guide the AI, I'm optimistic that by having the human involved, we will be able to better see bias and not perpetuate the bias that we see in the AI platforms. Because I think that there's just so much change ahead that it's hard to, it's very hard to keep up with. It's hard to wrap your mind around, and there is the very real fear that, you know, jobs will be lost and critical thinking will go away, and there's a lot of negativity that comes with this. But the more we have more open conversations about those things and then work on what can turn those conversations, I think is what I'm hopeful for.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to participate in those.
And I think it really speaks to what Mel said earlier around it being a tool and using it in that way. But as you said, I'm really excited as a consultancy that we work around the future of work, seeing what the trends are is the things that make us human, is where we're seeing the best the progression and opportunities. Thank you, ladies. It's been I could go on about this conversation. If we got the rosé out, we would be carry on flowing. And I could see from the audience that they were really engaged by this. I want to open up to if there are any questions. We've got a roaming mic, so any questions for anyone on the panel or reflections on this conversation today?
Thank you for this panel. It was very interesting. I would like to go back to the job interview example because I struggle with this. I always wonder how much is it taking away from my own capability to come up with a great question, a great interview question. Imagine a more junior person comes up to me, he's like, hey, so if I have an interview, how should I prep? I don't want to tell that person, go to AI, go to ChatGPT, like look it up yourself, because they already know that. I want to be able, myself, to come up with great questions on the spot. And I feel like the more I use ChatGPT, I just worry that over time, it trumps my capabilities of doing that. Is that true? How do you deal with that? What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it could go both ways. But honestly, I feel like the speed of the preparation of the basic questions, and just in my daughter's case, I mean, she just really had no clue, like, what basic questions she might be asked and how to bring the skills that she'd picked up in her resume into those things. And so it was really for her a conversation starter. And I think then she was better able to keep her mind open so that if she was given a kind of, a curveball question or one that she wasn't prepared for, she knew she had enough learning and enough background from that. But I do see your point. I mean, I don't think I would ever recommend that you take an answer that ChatGPT gave you and just parrot it back on an application or an interview. You have to make it your own.
Yeah. I do think it depends on you as a person, right? So we know, I do a lot of work with organizations around the recruitment process and how women will look at a job application and they'll only tend to, I've never been this woman, I've always think that there should be a push of why I'm applying for a job, but most women will look to see if they've got all of the criteria before applying, where men probably look about like, I can do 60% of that and then they'll apply. I think that's the same when it comes to like negotiation around salary, particularly at when you're on the onboarding process. So I think if you don't have that confidence to have those type of conversations, AI can really be helpful in that. Like, so if I'm going to be going into an interview, what would I do if my name was Dean and I was 45-year-old man with the same experience that I have? What type of questions would come up? Is a good basis to maybe strengthen how I would approach that process if I don't feel like I have that confidence. But if you do have that confidence, you could already be given that advice and using that critical thinking. So I think it's, again, using it as a tool rather than this is the baseline of everything I understand about a subject area, for instance.
Okay, we've got one last question here.
Thank you. You all spoke about the importance of awareness as well as of critical thinking, particularly you as moderator. So how can really nurture that critical thinking? And I'm not only talking about the young generation, but also a generation like mine, when we are super, super busy. So the critical thinking, how to safeguard that?
Well, I would jump in and say something that gets me, again, happy and excited about AI especially is the prompting. Because prompting is communication. And the better prompt you have, the better output you're gonna have. So talk about that digging into critical thinking. If you really want an amazing answer, if you really want to nail your interview question or get to then you need to work on that writing for yourself, because you need to come up with the best prompt. You can do a mega prompt, you can build on it. We've done some amazing stuff at Mia with that. But that keeps you, as if you're thinking that this is, again, my tool, not my boss, this is my tool. How can I best communicate to it? What does it need to hear? How does it need to hear it? That right there is, I think, one of the best critical thinking skill sets.
Agreed. Agreed. Right. Okay, we've run out of time today, but we are going to be around if you want to continue the conversation. Thank you again, Melissa. I thought somebody was behind me then, sorry. Melissa, Debra and Shani, thank you so much for your conversation and insights today, and thank you, audience, for engaging with us today. Thank you.